In the sultry Miami air of 2007, a deceptive tranquility hung over the Oceanfront Grand, a sprawling resort hotel shimmering under the twilight glow. Palm trees swayed with a gentle, hypnotic rhythm, their silhouettes stark against the canvas of a fading sunset. Laughter and the distant murmur of the ocean's embrace created a symphony of perfect leisure. For the Miller family, John, Sarah, and their 3-year-old daughter Lily, it was the culmination of months of anticipation, a dream vacation finally realized. Sarah, with a soft smile that rarely left her lips, watched Lily dance around their spacious suite, a whirlwind of boundless energy and unadulterated joy. Lily's constant companion, a well-loved plush ballerina doll she'd christened Prima, was clutched in her small hand, its worn pink tutu a testament to countless adventures shared. The room, a haven of soft blues and whites, was momentarily transformed into a whimsical stage. Lily, with Prima as her audience, twirled and giggled, her tiny bare feet padding softly on the cool tile floor. The innocent charm of her play filled every corner, chasing away any lingering whispers of the outside world. It was a scene of such profound, uncomplicated happiness that Sarah felt a pang of something akin to wistful perfection. John, ever the pragmatic one, checked his watch. Their reservation at the resort's upscale seafood restaurant was approaching. They had debated leaving Lily with a sitter, but the little girl had seemed so drowsy, so content, nestled in her bed, her breathing soft and even. A monitor on the bedside table would provide peace of mind. A quick, intimate dinner, just the two of them, seemed a harmless indulgence, a chance to reconnect after weeks of frenzied work and parental duties. They whispered their goodbyes, a gentle kiss pressed to Lily's forehead, her small hand still loosely gripping Prima. The door clicked shut, sealing in the hushed promise of sleep and sealing away, for a terrifying moment, the last vestiges of their serene world. This was the precipice of their catastrophe, a final fleeting breath before everything they knew shattered into an agonizing unknown. What happened next would echo through years of anguish and unanswered questions. To uncover the truth behind Lily's vanishing act and the incredible discovery that would follow years later, watch until the very end. And if this story captivates you, please subscribe to our channel for more untold tales. Tell us in the comments, where are you watching this video from? The soft chime of the restaurant's bell barely registered as John and Sarah Miller stepped back into the balmy Miami night. A light breeze, carrying the faint scent of salt and blooming night jasmine, offered a welcome respite from the air-conditioned chill of the dining room. They walked hand in hand, a comfortable silence between them punctuated by the distant rhythmic crash of waves. The shared meal had been a quiet success, a small bubble of adult normalcy in their otherwise child-centric world. Sarah's thoughts drifted pleasantly, envisioning Lily's peaceful sleep, perhaps a tiny hand still curled around Prima. She imagined the soft glow of the nightlight, the gentle rise and fall of her daughter's chest. As they approached their suite door, a subtle flicker of unease began to prick at Sarah's calm. The door, which she distinctly remembered clicking shut and locking, appeared to be slightly ajar. A sliver of light spilled into the dimly lit hallway. John, sensing her sudden tension, squeezed her hand. "Did we leave it open?" he murmured, a hint of confusion in his voice. Sarah shook her head, her brow furrowing. "No, I'm sure I locked it." A cold tendril of apprehension began to snake its way up her spine. The resort was safe, meticulously maintained, but an unlocked door in a hotel room, even for a moment, felt profoundly wrong. John pushed the door open wider, and they stepped inside. The room was not as they had left it. The soft glow of the nightlight was absent, replaced by a harsh overhead light that cast long, unsettling shadows. The crisp, neat order they had left behind was subtly disturbed. A pillow lay half off the bed, a sheet was crumpled near the footboard, but it was the silence, a heavy, unnatural silence that truly struck Sarah. The familiar, comforting sound of Lily's gentle breathing, usually amplified by the baby monitor on the bedside table, was conspicuously absent. Sarah's breath hitched in her throat. Her gaze shot to the empty crib, then to the floor beside it. Prima, Lily's beloved ballerina doll, was gone. A raw, primal fear seized Sarah. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat of terror. "Lily?" she whispered, her voice barely a breath, as if speaking too loudly might shatter the fragile hope that this was all a mistake, a momentary lapse in memory. John, his face drained of color, rushed to the crib, his hands frantically patting the mattress, as if Lily might somehow be hidden beneath the sheets. The empty space where their daughter should have been yawned like an abyss. They called her name, first softly, then with increasing urgency, their voices rising in a desperate crescendo that bounced off the silent walls. Every corner of the suite was searched, every closet, every nook and cranny. Their movements became frantic, a blur of motion fueled by growing panic. The carefully constructed peace of their vacation, the tranquil atmosphere of the resort, evaporated in an instant, replaced by a suffocating wave of dread. The air in the room grew thick, heavy with the unspoken horror that was rapidly consuming them. This wasn't a child's playful hide-and-seek. This was something far, far worse. Lily was gone, and with her, so too went their world. The 911 call, a frantic, choked-off plea, sliced through the quiet efficiency of the resort's evening operations. Within minutes, the sterile white and blue of Miami-Dade police cruisers shattered the elegant facade of the Oceanfront Grand. Their flashing lights painted the palm trees in an urgent, pulsing rhythm, an unwelcome beacon announcing the disaster that had unfolded within Suite 412. Uniformed officers, their faces grim, moved with a practiced, methodical swiftness that only deepened John and Sarah's terror. Every question, every measured tone, every glance exchanged between the authorities felt like another nail in the coffin of their dwindling hope. Detectives, their expressions carefully neutral, began their meticulous sweep of the room. They dusted for fingerprints, examined the doorframe for signs of forced entry, and scrutinized every inch of the immaculate suite. The initial findings, or rather the lack thereof, were chilling. There were no broken locks, no disturbed windows, no footprints, no sign of a struggle. It was as if Lily had simply evaporated into the humid Miami air, leaving behind only the gaping void of her absence. The leading theory, grimly articulated by Detective Ramirez, a seasoned officer with weary eyes, was abduction. The lack of forced entry suggested someone familiar with the hotel, or perhaps someone who had simply seized an opportunistic moment when the door was left unsecured. The implication hung heavy in the air. Lily had been taken. The hours that followed blurred into a surreal, agonizing nightmare. The hotel management, now a flurry of hushed apologies and offers of assistance, confined the Millers to a smaller, more secure room, though security felt like a cruel joke. The initial shock gave way to a cold, gnawing dread. John, typically stoic, paced incessantly, his hands clenched into fists, his jaw tight. Sarah, numb with grief, sat motionless on the edge of the bed, clutching a small framed photo of Lily, her bright, laughing eyes, her tiny dimples, the way her hair curled just so. She ran her thumb over the smooth glass, a silent prayer forming on her lips, a desperate bargain with a universe that seemed to have turned its back on them. As dawn approached, painting the ocean in hues of bruised purple and gray, the news began to spread. The local media, always hungry for a sensational story, converged on the Oceanfront Grand like vultures. Cameras flashed, microphones were thrust forward, and the Millers' personal tragedy was ripped open for public consumption. Their tear-streaked faces, their raw appeals for Lily's return, were broadcast across the nation. The image of the missing 3-year-old, her sweet face framed by light brown curls plastered on every news channel, became a haunting symbol of a parent's worst fear. Donations poured in for a reward, tips flooded the police lines, each one sparking a flicker of hope before extinguishing into nothingness. The investigation, a relentless, heartbreaking search, had begun, but the vast, silent expanse of the unknown swallowed every lead, every desperate prayer. The world watched, waited, and collectively held its breath. But Lily remained lost, a tiny ghost in a world suddenly devoid of her laughter. The relentless glare of the Miami sun seemed only to mock the perpetual twilight that settled over the Miller household. Days bled into weeks, weeks into months, and months into agonizing years. The initial flurry of police activity at the Oceanfront Grand dwindled, leaving behind only the cold ashes of unsolved mystery. The news cycles moved on, always hungry for the next big story. But for John and Sarah, time had stopped on that suffocating night in 2007. Every waking moment was a replaying of events, a desperate search for a forgotten detail, a missed clue that might unlock the impossible. Sleep became a fractured landscape of nightmares, punctuated by moments of desperate phantom hope, only to shatter with the harsh reality of morning. Their once vibrant home, filled with Lily's laughter and the scattered remnants of her toys, slowly transformed into a silent museum of grief. A small, carefully arranged shrine stood in the living room, Lily's favorite storybooks, a tiny pair of pink ballet slippers, and countless photographs, each one a poignant reminder of a life suspended. Sarah would sit for hours, tracing the innocent contours of Lily's face in the pictures, her mind a relentless loop of what-ifs and if-onlys. The vividness of Lily's memory became both a solace and a torment, a constant, unbearable ache in her chest. John, outwardly stoic, bore his own silent burden. He threw himself into work, burying himself in spreadsheets and meetings, anything to escape the suffocating quiet of their apartment. But the quiet followed him, a phantom presence. He would catch himself staring blankly at his computer screen, Lily's bright eyes superimposed over numbers and graphs. The effortless ease that had once defined their marriage began to fray. Communication became strained, often breaking down into unspoken accusations, or worse, a deafening silence. They were two shipwrecked souls, clinging to separate pieces of debris in a vast ocean of despair, unable to reach for each other, each consumed by their own private torment. The offers of support from friends and family slowly diminished, replaced by a quiet awkwardness. People didn't know what to say, how to offer comfort in the face of such an enduring, profound loss. Life, in its cruel indifference, moved forward for everyone else. Birthday parties passed without Lily's joyful presence. Holidays felt hollow. Each year that passed etched deeper lines of sorrow onto their faces, adding another layer of despair to the already insurmountable mountain of their grief. The hope that had once flickered like a desperate candle flame now barely smoldered, threatening to extinguish completely. They were adrift, lost in the relentless current of time, forever tethered to the day Lily vanished, forever waiting for a miracle that seemed destined never to arrive. The years stretched on, each one a testament to their unwavering, yet increasingly fragile, love for a child who was no more than a phantom memory. 4 years peeled away from the calendar, each one blurring into the next, until the sharp, painful edge of 2007 began to soften, pushed back by the sheer weight of time. The relentless humidity of Miami was replaced by the gentler warmth of northern Florida, a landscape of ancient oaks draped with Spanish moss, whispering forgotten tales. It was here, in a small, sleepy town tucked away from the coastal hustle, that Sarah and Daniel Hayes began their own version of a new beginning. They were a young couple, filled with the boundless optimism of fresh starts, eager to escape the relentless grind of city life and build a future rooted in quiet simplicity. Their dream manifested as an old 2-story Victorian house, its paint peeling like sunburnt skin, its porch sagging with the weight of decades. It stood on a quiet, tree-lined street surrounded by overgrown gardens and the palpable silence of a place long untouched. The house had been on the market for what seemed like an eternity, passed over by countless buyers daunted by its daunting state of disrepair. But Sarah, an artist with an eye for potential, saw beyond the dust and decay. She envisioned a home filled with light, laughter, and the scent of freshly baked bread. Daniel, pragmatic and hands-on, saw the challenge and the promise of a project that would truly be their own. They closed on the property in the early summer of 2011, the air thick with the scent of pine and impending rain. The first few weeks were a whirlwind of activity, a joyous, exhausting dance between demolition and dreams. They ripped up stained carpets, peeled away layers of faded wallpaper, and uncovered sturdy hardwood floors hidden beneath years of neglect. Every day brought a new discovery: a hidden alcove, a surprisingly well-preserved fireplace, the intricate patterns of original crown molding. It was a physical and emotional cleansing, a deliberate act of building something new from the remnants of the old. The previous owner, an elderly woman named Martha, who had lived in the house for over 50 years, had passed away peacefully, leaving behind a lifetime of accumulated possessions. Most of her belongings had been cleared out by distant relatives, but a significant amount of junk remained, relegated to the attic, the basement, and various forgotten corners. It was a daunting task, sorting through the detritus of someone else's life, but Sarah and Daniel approached it with a mix of curiosity and determination. They knew that before their new life could truly begin, they had to clear out the ghosts of the past, making space for the future they so eagerly anticipated. Little did they know, tucked away amidst the forgotten relics of Martha's life, lay a single, seemingly insignificant item that held the key to unlocking a truth far more profound and heartbreaking than they could ever imagine. A truth that would shatter their quiet new beginning and reverberate across years of unanswered prayers. The summer heat of Florida, unrelenting and thick, intensified as Sarah and Daniel climbed the rickety wooden steps leading to the attic. It was a space that felt perpetually stuck in a bygone era, an untouched repository of Martha's long life. Dust motes danced in the slivers of light that pierced the gloom through a single grimy window pane, illuminating an archaeological dig of forgotten domesticity. The air hung heavy, a mixture of dried wood, old paper, and something subtly sweet, like faded potpourri. Cobwebs, thick and glistening, draped from every rafter, catching on their hair as they navigated the narrow pathway between towering stacks of cardboard boxes and furniture cloaked in white sheets. Sarah, armed with a flashlight and a sense of determined curiosity, began her methodical exploration. She unearthed yellowed newspapers from the 1960s, brittle photo albums filled with sepia-toned strangers, and delicate hand-stitched quilts that smelled faintly of lavender. Daniel, ever the pragmatist, focused on the heavier items, wrestling old trunks and discarded appliances to clear a path. The hours melted away in the oppressive heat, punctuated only by the creak of floorboards and the rustle of disturbed dust. It was tedious work, but there was a quiet satisfaction in uncovering the layers of a life lived, a sense of connecting with the past that made the sweat and grime worthwhile. As the afternoon wore on, Sarah moved towards a particularly dark corner, half hidden behind a large, moth-eaten armchair. Her flashlight beam cut through the darkness, illuminating a stack of nondescript brown boxes, smaller than the others, tucked away as if deliberately forgotten. They seemed to contain children's items, tiny, faded clothes, a worn teddy bear missing an eye, a collection of chipped wooden blocks. It was a poignant discovery, hinting at a hidden chapter of Martha's life, perhaps a grandchild who had once visited, or even a child of her own who hadn't been evident from the initial clear-out. She reached for the top box, its cardboard soft with age. Inside, nestled amongst a tangle of faded ribbons and a small, tarnished music box, lay a doll. It was a ballerina, no more than 12 inches tall, her pink satin tutu dulled and slightly torn, her delicate features smudged with dust. One of her tiny ballet slippers was missing, and her yarn hair, once meticulously styled, was a tangled mess. Yet, despite her dilapidated state, there was something about the doll that pulled at Sarah. It wasn't just the inherent sadness of a forgotten toy. There was a flicker of something more, a recognition, a faint, insistent whisper of familiarity that she couldn't quite place. It was a feeling akin to hearing a half-remembered melody just out of reach. Sarah picked up the doll, carefully brushing away the dust. The doll's simple, painted smile and wide, innocent eyes seemed to gaze up at her with a peculiar intensity. She turned it over in her hands, noticing the small, almost imperceptible fraying of the fabric on its back, a tiny, unique tear. Her brow furrowed in concentration. Where had she seen this doll before? Or something remarkably similar? The memory was tantalizingly close, a wisp of smoke, refusing to coalesce. She felt a strange, unsettling pull, as if the doll itself held a secret, vibrating with a silent energy. Unaware of the profound significance of her find, Sarah placed the dusty ballerina gently on a nearby trunk, a small, unassuming relic that held the terrifying key to a decade-old mystery, poised to unravel the quiet fabric of their new beginning. The attic, once a mere storage space, had just yielded its most extraordinary and heartbreaking secret. The old house hummed with the quiet industry of renovation, but for Sarah, a new unsettling hum had begun to vibrate beneath the surface of her thoughts. The dusty ballerina doll, now sitting on her bedside table, had become an unwelcome, insistent presence. She found herself glancing at it repeatedly. The image of its worn pink tutu and vacant button eyes burned into her mind. The nagging feeling of familiarity had only intensified, transforming from a faint whisper to a persistent itch in her subconscious. She knew this doll, or more accurately, she knew of this doll, but from where? And why did its very existence evoke such a peculiar blend of curiosity and dread? Even as she painted walls a soft cream or sanded down a stubborn patch of flooring, her mind would drift back to the attic, to the moment she had pulled the doll from its forgotten box. There was something about the specific shade of pink, the slightly crooked stitching on its arm, the precise location of the missing slipper. It was a detail so minute, yet so vivid, that it felt like a ghost of a memory just beyond her grasp. She tried to dismiss it as a trick of the mind, a common toy that simply resembled others. But the feeling persisted, a subtle dissonance in the quiet harmony of their new life. One evening, after Daniel had fallen asleep, exhausted from a day of tearing down old plaster, Sarah found herself restless. She slipped out of bed, careful not to disturb him, and went to the living room. Her laptop sat on the coffee table, its screen dark. She opened it, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. What would she even search for? Old ballerina doll? The thought felt absurd, almost desperate. Yet the compulsion was too strong to ignore. She started broadly, typing "Missing Child Florida 2000s doll." The search results populated slowly, a grim tableau of unsolved cases. Each thumbnail image a reminder of someone's unimaginable loss. Most were unfamiliar, blurring into a generic landscape of sorrow. But then, as she scrolled further, her breath caught in her throat. A grainy news photograph from a decade ago. It showed a distraught woman, her face etched with grief, holding up a picture of a smiling 3-year-old girl. And beside the girl, clutched in her tiny hand, was a doll, a ballerina doll. Sarah clicked the link, her heart beginning to pound a frantic rhythm against her ribs. The article was old, dated 2007. The headline read, "3-year-old Lily Miller vanishes from Miami resort, police suspect abduction." The accompanying text detailed the heart-wrenching story. The vacation, the parents' dinner, the empty room, the missing child, and the one crucial detail that now screamed at Sarah from the screen. Her beloved plush ballerina doll, named Prima, also disappeared. The image on the screen was a smaller, clearer photograph of the doll. It was identical. The same shade of faded pink, the same general wear, the distinct lack of one tiny ballet slipper. A wave of ice-cold dread washed over Sarah, chilling her to the bone despite the warm night air. This wasn't a coincidence. This wasn't a similar doll. This was the doll, the one from her attic, the one that had been missing for 4 years, presumed lost with the child who had vanished without a trace. The implications crashed over her, heavy and overwhelming. This doll, this forgotten relic from Martha's cluttered attic, was a direct link to a national tragedy, a cold case that had haunted headlines for years. The quiet satisfaction of renovating their dream home was replaced by a suffocating sense of horror. Her hands trembled as she closed the laptop, the screen reflecting her pale, shocked face. The doll on her bedside table, once merely curious, now felt like a silent, accusing witness. The new beginning they had so carefully constructed in this sleepy town was suddenly overshadowed by a dark, chilling secret, one that now lay squarely at their feet, demanding to be unearthed. The weight of this unexpected discovery was immense, pressing down on Sarah with an almost physical force, leaving her reeling on the precipice of an unimaginable truth. The pre-dawn hours held a chilling silence in the Hayes' new home, a silence that pressed down on Sarah with the weight of unspeakable knowledge. Sleep, once a welcome escape, now felt impossible. The image of Lily Miller's bright, innocent face, forever frozen in a faded newspaper clipping, haunted her. And then there was the doll, Prima, sitting accusingly on her nightstand, a tangible link to a decade-old nightmare. Daniel stirred beside her, mumbling softly in his sleep, oblivious to the storm raging in Sarah's mind. How could she tell him? How could she articulate the terrifying reality that their quiet, hopeful new beginning was built on a foundation that now seemed to crumble under the weight of a stolen child's history? When morning finally arrived, bringing with it the weak light of a cloudy day, Sarah felt a profound exhaustion that went beyond physical fatigue. She explained everything to Daniel, her voice trembling, showing him the old news articles on her laptop, then pointing to the worn doll. Daniel's initial disbelief slowly morphed into a horrified understanding. His face, usually so open and kind, tightened with a mix of shock and a growing sense of responsibility. They were no longer just a couple renovating an old house. They were accidental custodians of a devastating secret, tangled in a tragedy that had once gripped the nation. The decision of what to do felt both clear and terrifyingly monumental. They knew, with a certainty that chilled them both, that they had no choice but to involve the authorities. The call to the local police department was made with trembling hands, the words feeling inadequate to convey the enormity of their discovery. It was met with initial skepticism, a polite but weary voice on the other end, accustomed to false leads and the ramblings of the well-intentioned. But when Sarah, her voice firm despite the tremor, mentioned the specific details, the Miami case, the year 2007, and most crucially, the unique description of the missing ballerina doll, the tone on the other end shifted. A new gravity entered the conversation. Within hours, their quiet street was once again punctuated by the arrival of official vehicles, though this time they were unmarked, discreet, a deliberate contrast to the flashing lights of that long-ago Miami night. Two detectives, one a seasoned veteran whose name, Detective Ramirez, sent a jolt through Sarah, the very detective from the original case, now older, grayer, but with the same weary wisdom in his eyes, arrived at their doorstep. The other, a younger, sharp-eyed woman, hung back, observing. The sight of Ramirez confirmed Sarah's deepest fears. This was real. This was Lily Miller's doll. He handled Prima with a reverence that spoke volumes, turning it over in his gloved hands, his gaze distant, lost in the echoes of a case that had haunted his career. The small, almost imperceptible tear on the doll's back, which Sarah had noted, was quickly identified as a distinctive mark mentioned in the original missing persons report, a detail never released to the public. It was the undeniable proof. The focus of the investigation immediately shifted to Martha, the house's previous owner. Through hushed interviews with bewildered neighbors, a fragmented picture began to emerge. Martha had been a reclusive woman in her later years, a quiet figure who rarely ventured beyond her garden. But stories, whispers that had long been dismissed as local gossip, now took on a chilling new significance. Neighbors recalled Martha's deep sadness, her profound loneliness after a series of miscarriages earlier in her life, a quiet desperation to have a child that had never materialized. They spoke of how, around 2007, she had suddenly, inexplicably, seemed to find a renewed sense of purpose, though no one could pinpoint why. She had suddenly presented a young girl as her niece, a quiet child who rarely played outside, always kept close to Martha, and whom Martha seemed to dote on with an almost obsessive devotion. The pieces, once scattered and seemingly unrelated, began to click into place with terrifying precision. Martha had moved out only months prior to her death, relocating to a small, isolated cabin in a neighboring state, seeking, her relatives claimed, a quieter life. The motives, though still clouded by layers of time and psychological complexity, began to coalesce into a chillingly plausible scenario: a woman consumed by the unfulfilled desire for a child, driven to a desperate, unspeakable act. The weight of this realization pressed down on Sarah and Daniel, their shock turning into a profound sadness for Lily, for her true parents, and even for the woman who had, in her twisted grief, stolen a life. The discovery of Prima was not just a relic, it was a beacon, a fragile thread leading them towards a truth that promised to both shatter and finally heal a decade-old wound. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in years, the possibility of finding Lily Miller alive was no longer a desperate dream, but a terrifying, tangible reality. The search was back on, and the true story of Lily's disappearance was finally beginning to surface, poised on the brink of an unimaginable revelation. The quiet investigation set in motion by Sarah and Daniel's discovery intensified with a speed and precision that left them both reeling. Detective Ramirez, fueled by the unexpected resurrection of a case that had long haunted him, meticulously pieced together Martha's last known movements. The trail, though faint after her death, eventually led to a remote, unassuming mobile home community nestled deep within the pine forests of rural Georgia, a place chosen, it seemed, for its isolation and lack of prying eyes. It was a stark contrast to the sun-drenched, bustling resort where Lily had vanished, a deliberate attempt to erase the past. Armed with a warrant and the cold, hard evidence provided by Prima, a small task force descended on the address. The air was thick with tension, a mix of anticipation and dread. No one knew what they would find. They were prepared for anything: an empty house, an adult child living under a new name, or the devastating confirmation of a long-held fear. The small, weathered mobile home, surrounded by a patchy yard and a scattering of neglected toys, offered no immediate clues. Its windows were dark, its silence profound. When the door finally opened, it wasn't Martha who answered. A woman in her late 40s, her face etched with a mix of weariness and something akin to a quiet defiance, stood framed in the doorway. She introduced herself as Evelyn, a distant relative of Martha's who had taken over the property, and she claimed the care of Martha's niece. Her eyes, though, held a flicker of something guarded, a quick, almost imperceptible shift when Detective Ramirez mentioned the name Lily Miller. The air crackled with unspoken truths. It was inside the mobile home, amidst the cluttered, lived-in chaos of an ordinary household, that the shocking truth finally materialized. Sitting at a small kitchen table, diligently drawing in a coloring book, was a child. A girl, perhaps 7 or 8 years old, with light brown hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. Her eyes, wide and curious, looked up at the strangers with a flicker of apprehension. She was introduced as Amy, but to Ramirez and to the faint, lingering hope in Sarah and Daniel's hearts, she was unmistakably Lily. The facial features, though matured by 4 years, were eerily consistent with the missing girl's photos: the subtle curve of her chin, the way her eyebrows arched, even the tiny dimple that appeared when she momentarily smiled at the unexpected visitors. The immediate arrest of Evelyn, who later confessed to having taken over Martha's desperate secret after her death, occurred swiftly and without resistance. Her motives, when finally extracted, were a tragic echo of Martha's own: a lifetime of childlessness, a profound, aching emptiness that had driven her to embrace the delusion of a stolen child as her own. She spoke of Martha's gift to her, of how she had been raising Lily as her own daughter since Martha's health declined. It was a chilling testament to the human capacity for self-deception and the desperate lengths to which longing could drive someone. For Lily, the appearance of these stern-faced adults and the sudden, forceful removal of the woman she had always known as her aunt was a terrifying, incomprehensible disruption. Her world, small and seemingly stable, imploded. She watched, wide-eyed and silent, as Evelyn was led away in handcuffs, then turned her bewildered gaze to the detectives, her innocent face reflecting a profound fear of the unknown. Her confusion was palpable, a silent scream of disorientation. She had no memory of a Miami resort, no recollection of parents named John and Sarah, and certainly no connection to a doll named Prima, which now served as the irrefutable evidence of her stolen past. The delicate, fragile threads of her stolen life were now irrevocably severed, and a new, terrifying chapter was about to begin for the child once known as Lily Miller. The long-awaited answers had arrived, but they brought with them a fresh wave of challenges, a complex tapestry of healing that would be far more intricate than anyone could have imagined. The sterile confines of the Child Welfare Office felt nothing like the long-awaited embrace of a reunion. The air hummed with a nervous energy, thick with unspoken anxieties, and a profound, almost terrifying hope. John and Sarah Miller sat rigidly on a small couch, their hands clasped so tightly their knuckles were white. Years of grief, of unanswered prayers, of imagining this very moment, had built an expectation so vast it felt impossible to contain. Across from them, a child psychologist spoke in soft, measured tones, preparing them for the encounter, explaining the delicacy of the situation, the need for patience, for understanding. Lily, now known as Amy, had no memory of them. Her world had just been shattered, and they, her biological parents, were strangers, figures from a life she didn't recall. The door finally opened, and a small figure tentatively entered the room. Lily. She was 7 years old, her once bright curls a little longer, her face a little leaner, but undeniably their daughter. She clutched a worn teddy bear, not Prima, but a different comfort object from her stolen life. Her eyes, wide and guarded, swept over the room, settling on John and Sarah, with a mixture of apprehension and a profound, innocent confusion. There was no joyful rush, no cry of recognition, no spontaneous embrace, just a quiet, bewildered gaze. Sarah's heart, which had been pounding a relentless rhythm of anticipation, sank with a chilling ache. This was not the reunion she had dreamt of. This was a child, wary and uncertain, thrust into an impossible situation. She tried to smile, a trembling curve of her lips, extending a hand slowly, as if approaching a skittish fawn. "Lily," she whispered, her voice thick with unshed tears. The name, unfamiliar to the girl, seemed to cause a flicker of something in her eyes. Not recognition, but perhaps a fleeting echo of a forgotten sound. John, usually the more reserved of the two, felt an overwhelming surge of emotion, a desperate need to bridge the chasm of the lost years. He knelt down, trying to meet her eye level, his own eyes brimming. "Lily," he repeated, his voice choked, "it's Mommy and Daddy." But the words, meant to be a comfort, seemed only to increase her unease. She instinctively recoiled a step, pressing herself slightly closer to the psychologist, her small face a mask of bewilderment. The connection they yearned for, the instant bond they had always imagined, was not there. Instead, there was a vast, silent space filled with years of stolen memories. The psychologist gently guided the interaction, encouraging small, neutral activities. Lily was offered crayons and paper, and she quietly began to draw, her focus unwavering, her body language subtly conveying a desire to retreat into her own world. John and Sarah watched, aching with a love that felt utterly unreciprocated. They spoke softly, recounting memories of her babyhood, stories of the bright, curious toddler she once was, hoping some fragment might resonate. They spoke of Prima, how much she loved her doll, showing her photos of the ballerina, including the one found in Martha's attic. Lily looked at the pictures, then at the actual doll, which had been brought in as a tangible link to her past, but her expression remained blank. It was a toy she had never known, a stranger's treasured possession. The session ended with no great breakthrough, no magical moment of recognition. It was a slow, painful introduction to a child who was their daughter by blood, but a stranger in every other sense. The psychological trauma of her abduction and subsequent reparenting by Martha and Evelyn had formed a new identity, one that did not include the Millers. They left the office with a profound sense of both relief and fresh devastation. Lily was alive. That was the miracle. But the journey to truly bring her home, to mend the fractured pieces of her identity and rebuild a family from the ashes of unimaginable loss, had only just begun. The first step had been taken, but the true path to reunification was long, arduous, and fraught with emotional complexities they were only just beginning to comprehend. The journey from rural Georgia back to Florida was more than a change of scenery. It was a complex, emotionally charged passage into an uncertain future. Lily, or Amy, as she still primarily knew herself, sat silently in the back seat of the social worker's car, occasionally glancing out the window at the passing blur of trees. Her small face remained a study in quiet bewilderment, her eyes holding a deep, almost ancient sadness. John and Sarah, following in their own car, maintained a respectful distance, their hearts a turbulent mix of overwhelming love and agonizing frustration. Each mile that separated Lily from the only life she remembered also brought her closer to a past she couldn't recall and a family she didn't recognize. The initial days at home were a delicate dance around a fragile silence. Their once vibrant house, meticulously prepared for a child's return, felt overwhelming to Lily. The toys, clothes, and a bedroom, decorated with the faint, hopeful echoes of her past self, were foreign. She moved through the rooms like a hesitant ghost, her touch light, her presence almost imperceptible. The psychologist had warned them about the inevitable period of adjustment, about the potential for emotional withdrawal, anger, and confusion. Still, nothing could have prepared them for the profound distance that separated them from their own child. Mealtimes were particularly agonizing. John and Sarah would try to engage her in conversation, asking about her day, pointing out details from her new room. Lily would offer monosyllabic answers, her gaze often fixed on her plate, or she would simply retreat into herself, her silence a wall between them. Sarah, desperate for any sign of connection, would watch her daughter, searching for a familiar gesture, a flash of the spirited toddler she remembered. Sometimes a tiny mannerism, the way Lily bit her lip in concentration, or the specific tilt of her head when she was curious, would strike a chord of recognition, bringing a bittersweet pang to Sarah's chest. They introduced Lily to the concept of Lily as her true name, explaining in gentle, simplified terms that she had been lost and now found. They spoke of the Miami hotel, of her baby pictures, of Prima, the ballerina doll now carefully preserved and displayed in her room. Lily would listen, her expression unreadable, as if hearing a fantastical story that had no bearing on her own reality. The psychologist had emphasized that forcing memories or pushing too hard could be detrimental. Healing, she explained, was a process that unfolded at its own pace. Nighttime was often the hardest. Lily, accustomed to the familiar comforts of her life with Evelyn, struggled with nightmares and anxieties in her new surroundings. Sarah would sit by her bed for hours, gently stroking her hair, humming lullabies, her presence a silent offering of comfort and security. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, tiny cracks began to appear in the wall of Lily's detachment, a hesitant glance, a momentary leaning into Sarah's touch, a quiet acceptance of John's presence in her room before sleep. One afternoon, months into her return, Sarah found Lily in her bedroom, sitting on the floor, looking at the Prima doll. She hadn't touched it before. Now she traced the worn satin of its tutu with a tentative finger. Sarah watched from the doorway, holding her breath. Lily then picked up a faded baby picture of herself, holding the exact same doll, and for a fleeting second her eyes held a spark, a distant echo of recognition, a faint glimmer of a truth that had been buried deep for far too long. It was a fragile, fleeting moment, but for John and Sarah, it was a profound victory, a tiny beacon of hope on the long, arduous road to truly bringing their daughter home. The path was still steep and winding, filled with more challenges than they could foresee. But for the first time since Lily's return, they felt a fragile sense of forward momentum, a whisper of the possibility that one day their broken family might truly begin to heal. The quiet breakthroughs were small, almost imperceptible at first, like the fragile shoots of new growth pushing through scorched earth. But they were there, undeniable signs that the deep wounds of Lily's past were, at last, beginning to close. The initial wary silence that had permeated the Miller home slowly began to soften, replaced by a tentative exchange of words, then phrases, and eventually the hesitant bloom of shared laughter. Sarah, with a patience born of limitless love, continued to be Lily's constant shadow, offering comfort, presence, and quiet reassurance. She never pushed, never demanded. She simply was there, a steady, unwavering anchor in Lily's turbulent, re-emerging world. The psychologist's sessions continued, becoming a vital lifeline for Lily. In the safe, neutral space of the therapy room, she slowly began to untangle the knotted threads of her identity. She spoke in a quiet, almost detached voice of the woman she knew as Aunt Evelyn, of the small, secluded life she had led, of the stories Evelyn had told her about her parents who were away. The therapist gently guided her, helping her to process the trauma of the sudden change. The confusion of discovering her entire life had been a carefully constructed falsehood. For Lily, it was a profound reckoning, the slow, painful realization that the world she had believed to be real was, in fact, a stolen narrative. John, initially struggling with the emotional distance, found his own ways to connect. He started small, reading to Lily each night, his deep voice a comforting rumble in the quiet room. He built Lego castles with her, patiently guiding her small hands, allowing her to lead their play. He discovered her quiet love for animals and began taking her to local nature parks where they would spend hours watching birds and squirrels. These shared, simple moments, devoid of the pressure of explicit memory, began to forge a new bond, a bridge built on shared experiences in the present rather than a broken past. Lily would occasionally lean against him, a fleeting, almost unconscious gesture, but one that spoke volumes to John's aching heart. The Prima doll, once a symbol of tragic loss, gradually transformed into an object of quiet curiosity for Lily. She would pick it up, turning it over in her hands, her gaze thoughtful. One afternoon, Sarah found Lily sitting on her bed, arranging Prima and a small collection of other dolls. "She likes to dance," Lily murmured, a faint smile touching her lips, a memory, perhaps, not of the specific act with her biological mother, but a resonance with an innate part of herself that recognized the doll's purpose. It was a breakthrough, a tiny crack in the wall of amnesia, allowing a sliver of her true self to peek through. As the months passed, the public fascination with the case began to wane, replaced by newer headlines. This was a blessing. The Miller family needed privacy, the quiet space to heal without the intrusive glare of cameras and the constant retelling of their trauma. They learned to navigate the complexities of their new normal, a life forever marked by the disappearance and the return, but also infused with a profound appreciation for every moment. The process was messy, filled with setbacks and moments of despair, but beneath it all, a quiet strength was building. Lily still struggled at times, and the memories of her stolen years would sometimes surface in her dreams or in moments of quiet reflection. But she was learning to trust, learning to love, learning that the gentle presence of John and Sarah was a constant, unwavering force. The family, once broken beyond repair, was slowly, painstakingly beginning to mend. They were learning to forgive, not just Evelyn for her unforgivable act, but also themselves for the years of absence, and even the universe for the cruel twist of fate. The laughter in their home, once a ghost, now echoed with increasing frequency, a testament to the fragile yet enduring power of connection and the slow, beautiful miracle of a family finding its way back to itself. Prima, the forgotten doll, watched from her shelf, a silent guardian of a truth finally reclaimed, and a symbol of a healing that was still ongoing, but undeniably finally taking root. Years unfurled, carrying with them the gentle currents of change and the quiet erosion of raw pain. The initial, searing wound of Lily's disappearance and the subsequent bewildering rediscovery had, over time, transformed into a deep, abiding scar, a testament to their resilience, a permanent mark on their family's story, but no longer a source of daily agony. The house, once a silent monument to grief, now resonated with the lively, sometimes chaotic sounds of a fully restored home. Lily, no longer just Amy, had fully embraced her true identity, her name now flowing naturally from her own lips. She grew, as children do, with a curious blend of her past and present. The psychological scars of her abduction, while not entirely erased, had been largely integrated into her evolving self. She continued to see a therapist, processing the layers of her unique history, learning to navigate the complex emotional landscape of having two sets of memories, one of a stolen childhood and one of a reclaimed reality. She understood, with a maturity beyond her years, the desperation that had driven Martha and Evelyn, though understanding did not equate to forgiveness of the act itself. There was a quiet strength in her, born from enduring the unimaginable, a depth that set her apart. John and Sarah, too, had transformed. The years of waiting had tested their marriage to its limits, but Lily's return and the arduous process of her healing had forged a bond between them that was unbreakable. They had learned a profound patience, a deeper empathy, and an unwavering commitment to each other and to their daughter. The fear of loss never entirely vanished, a subtle undercurrent beneath the surface of their lives, but it was overshadowed by a fierce, protective love and a newfound appreciation for every single moment. They no longer took presence for granted. Life in their Florida home settled into a comfortable, almost ordinary rhythm. Lily attended school, made friends, discovered a passion for painting that she pursued with quiet intensity. The Prima doll, once a silent witness to tragedy, now sat on Lily's dresser, a cherished possession, a tangible link to a story she was now learning to tell herself, a symbol of a past she had survived and a future she was building. It was a reminder of what was lost, but more importantly, of what was found. The media spotlight, which had once shone so harshly on their pain, had long since moved on. They were no longer the Miller family from the abduction case. They were simply the Millers, a family, unique in their history, but ordinary in their daily joys and challenges. They understood that healing was not a destination, but a continuous journey, a series of small, conscious choices to embrace the present, to cherish the laughter, and to face the inevitable difficulties with a united front. In the quiet evenings, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in vibrant hues, Sarah would often watch Lily, engaged in some simple activity, her face alight with an unburdened happiness. A profound sense of gratitude would wash over her, a feeling that transcended the horrors they had endured. Lily was home. She was safe. And in the intricate, unpredictable tapestry of life, they had found their way back to each other, a testament to the enduring power of hope, the resilience of the human spirit, and the unwavering strength of a family that had journeyed through darkness and emerged not unscathed, but undeniably, powerfully whole. The story of Lily Miller was a testament to the unyielding grip of the past, but more profoundly, it was a quiet, compelling narrative of unexpected discoveries and the slow, beautiful miracle of second chances.